What is drivability? I don't even understand what drivability is.
So drivability is basically when somebody comes in and says, my car doesn't start, it doesn't accelerate correctly, it misses. That's, how it runs. That's pretty much drivability.
So it's not like an oil change?
No, that's more maintenance. So drivability is more like fuel injection problems, check engine lights.
So everybody has pretty much drivability problems?
Yes, at some point in the life of that vehicle, it will have some drivability issues.
Okay.
Yeah. So fuel injection problems, low fuel pressure, go on and on. But yeah, drivability is more of how the vehicle runs. It has an issue starting, running, driving, accelerating.
So it's different than maintenance?
Yes. So maintenance would be, just basic maintenance would be take your car in every so many thousand miles, have the oil change, have the transmission fluid change, have a brake inspection. There's a lot of different, portions of maintenance, but.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's interesting. I did not know that.
Okay.
I didn't, because you say drivability and I don't know what you're talking about.
So yeah, that's what happens when you spend 4 years in a shop talking to mechanics and people that have been in the industry. Drivability is.
I'm going to say it's broken.
Yeah.
It's broken.
Can be broken.
There's a noise, thingamajiggy.
There is a drivability called a no start, and that is a drivability. It doesn't start.
I've had that happen to me.
So that is drivability. It's hard to drive it when it won't start.
Okay, I'm kind of curious. You say, I've heard diagnostic, and I always thought every shop put a car on a computer to diagnose it.
Not really. Not typically. It just depends. So back in the day, there used to be big oscilloscopes, and they run a diagnostics on it. You hooked up all these things and put it through a power balance. And
I thought everybody did that all the time.
No. Any more diagnoses are. I hear people say diagnostics. So diagnostics is what you're paying for. A diagnosis is what the mechanic is doing. He is diagnosing the problem. So most drivability or diagnosis is done with a scanner, which it's this big, size of a laptop. He plugs it into what's called the ALDL connector, and it gives him access to the computer, all the information, and all the codes that it's stored. So that's how it's done now. But that doesn't mean every time you take your car in, they do a diagnostics.
Oh.
They may call it diagnostics, but they're just going to give it to the mechanic and say, hey, this thing's got a check engine light on, go check it out.
Okay.
And the technician, if he's any kind of a technician, first thing he's going to do is he's going to test drive it before he does anything. Even with the light on. Yeah, it should go through a test drive first. Test drive, then check the code, and then depending on what he finds on the code, then there's charts that you run to verify certain things, and the charts are written by the dealers, by the manufacturer, and so they'll have you go check for certain things in a chart.
Okay. So, what about those scanners you buy that tells you A59 is broken?
Okay, so that's a code reader. So there's a difference between a scanner and a code reader. A scanner does the same thing. It will pull the code out because he has to have the code to diagnose it. But a code reader, all it does, it's just telling you what code is stored. That's all it tells you. It's the number and what the code is. That's all it's going to tell you. And that doesn't tell you, and I'll tell you something that people have always thought of. Well, don't you have one of those computers that you hook up and it tells you what's wrong with the car?
Absolutely. That's what I thought diagnostics was.
Here's the deal. When you pull a code out of a car, all it does is it gives you a certain area that the problem exists in. And there's lots of testing you got to do, pressures on fuel. You might look for how much airflow, a lot of different things. So just because it says a really common ones, you'll hear O2 sensors bad or O2 sensor code. And automatically people say, well, you pulled the code and it said O2 sensor is, you just put O2 and it fixes it. That's not true. What it means that the O2 sensor circuit, for whatever reason, sees a problem. It could be no voltage to the O2 sensor. It could be a
Really?
misfire in the engine. It's making it look like it's lean all the time. It could be a vacuum leak, a vacuum line that fell off, so it's showing lean all the time. A plugged up air filter that's showing it rich all the time. So just because it says O2 sensor code doesn't mean the O2 sensor is bad. You still have to do the diagnosis to confirm what the problem is.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Because I have an O2 sensor that pulls up when my car gets scanned. You know, when I lived in Vegas.
And it would say O2 sensor failure.
And so my friend, who he's not a mechanic, my best friend's husband, he's not a mechanic, but he's like, we should just change the O2 sensor.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
But it was hard to get to, is why he didn't change it, and we thought that would fix it.
So if no one knows, the O2 sensor basically looks like a spark plug. You know, it just
But it was
goes
hard to
in
get to in my
sometimes
car.
they're very hard to get to, and they just screw out. Sometimes they're hard to get out. They don't want to come loose, and they just have like 3 wires and they plug in. And what they do is they tell the computer how much oxygen is in the stream of air, and that's what it uses. That is the major sensor that the computer uses to adjust air-fuel ratio. So, and it's not a bad thing to go ahead and change O2 sensor. Like if I had a car that had an O2 sensor code, and I was on the phone with a friend, and they said, "Hey, I took my car to the shop, and they pulled the O2 sensor code." I'd say, "Yeah, change the sensor first."
If you can get
You know,
to
it's
it.
$100. And it's easy to change, and if it fixes the car, you're done. But be aware, just because it says O2 sensor code doesn't mean that O2 sensor is going to fix it. It may not. And then after you change it, you have to have the code cleared somehow.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can clear the codes with those readers that you're talking about, and which is nice because you can do the repair, clear the code, and then go drive it for about 100 miles. It won't reset that code for about 100 miles.
Yeah.
So drive it for about 100 miles, and then if the light comes back on, then you're gonna have to take it into a shop and have them troubleshoot what the problem is.
Yeah.
But if it stays out, then you know you got lucky and fixed it with $100, you know, instead of $1,000.
What's your experience with YouTube? Because me personally, like when I was trying to get my brakes done, I looked at YouTube to kind of see how to do it. Because could I manage it? But it seemed excessive. And so I was just a casual, like, YouTube user. I was not on it every day, just if I needed help with something.
I think YouTube is very helpful. I mean, there's not a technician out there, I'll guarantee you right now, that doesn't have his cell phone in his pocket and have access to YouTube and other things for trying to diagnose problems, because it saves you a lot of time. But you have to be able to read through the bull crap sometimes. You know, you gotta, like, you can kind of tell when somebody knows what they're talking about with a video after a while. You know, it just takes some time. It depends on what your skill level is. There's certain things that I would tell people, you know, don't take chances on looking at a YouTube video and doing it at home. And brakes is probably one of the top ones. Is like, your brakes are like your lifeline.
Really?
You want something that you want Joe Blow, 15-year-old kid down the road looking up YouTube and putting brakes on your car. Because
I'm surprised.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it.
Really?
Yeah, I would. It wouldn't bother me to have somebody that is qualified to use YouTube as a reference to maybe look, how to get something off or how to torque something or something like that. But when it comes to brakes, I'm really a stickler when it comes to brakes. You really need to know what you're doing. Because you could be putting brake pads on and not really understand the braking system and actually have air in the lines, which can cause a really spongy pedal, or you could have a failed master cylinder and not realize it because you're not qualified. And that can become, it can become a really safety problem for sure.